Well, you know what that music means, folks. It means that we are on TV Talk, brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK, where we talk about critically acclaimed and or popular television shows from an objectivist perspective. Sometimes I wonder if we talk about it from an objectivist perspective. Sometimes objectivist doesn't seem to find its way into the conversation, but sometimes it does.
It
And
will today.
sometimes I think it will today. I think, yes, I think it will today, particularly with the end of this show that we are doing today called The Last of Us. I think anybody watching out there today knows what that show is. It is on HBO Max, and it is created by Neil Druckmann, who I guess wrote and created the game The Last of Us, which in 2014, I want to say I was totally and absolutely obsessed with. It is one of the best horror genre video games I have ever played in my life. And the series itself does not disappoint, I have to say. Pedro Pascal plays Joel Miller. Ellie Williams, or Bella Ramsey, I'm sorry, plays Ellie Williams. They are the two main characters. There's tons of other great characters around them as well. Some great storylines that we get to explore through the, I guess, is it 8 episodes, 9 episodes? Or whatever it is that they have. But the two main characters are Joel and Ellie, and the thrust of the series is about the development of their relationship after this terrible apocalypse happens. Of course, it's set up in a typical woke fashion with the possibility of global warming, creating a perfect petri dish for this cordyceps fungi to invade the earth and to do great damage to people, which it of course does, thanks to human beings warming the planet. And this of course creates an apocalyptic world where there are people who are infected with this cordyceps fungi who become zombies, more or less, and people who aren't, who are some of whom are isolated in quarantine zones, some of whom are rebels against the quarantine zone government, called Fedra, and in between those two states, we find our heroes Joel Miller and Ellie Williams. Eventually, I do want to give a special shout out to one of the cast members who particularly impressed me. She was in the first 2 episodes, Nico Parker. She plays Sarah Miller. She plays Joel's daughter, and the relationship between the two of them was so beautiful, so amazingly played out. That by the time she gets killed, of course she gets killed, I'm sorry, that's a spoiler alert, you are weeping for the loss, just as Joel is. Anyway, I want to introduce my two partners in crime. I've gone on long enough about this. Jennifer Bouani and Jack Schumann. I think they sort of feel the same way about as I do, but I'm going to let them talk about this a little bit too. Guys, what do you think about this show? What is good about
I
it?
was
First,
pleasantly surprised because I don't typically go for zombie shows. In fact, I've been avoiding them ever since Walking Dead. Can't handle it. Jax was over at my place when I watched the first few episodes, and I was like, have a head under my covers. Tell me when it's over. But they were right. It's not about that. That's kind of the background, and it's going on. And luckily, there's not a lot of that. And it was really more about this relationship between Joel and Ellie, and which I loved. And I loved that it felt like a video game, that they had elevated to a next level every episode. I liked how that was structured. And there was always interesting dilemmas at every step of the way. Jax, what do you think?
One of which we're going to talk about later on.
I completely agree. I absolutely loved it. And in fact, I watched the last episode again last night just to get it like fresh in my head. I watched the show with my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter, and we both absolutely loved it. And it's funny because I think it was maybe like 2 or 3 episodes in, I learned that it was based off of a video game. I had no idea about it. But it's something that really has always bothered me about TV shows where it's like the apocalypse or you're fighting to save your life. And is that people don't, when they're shooting people, they don't like go and pick up the guns. Like when they're out of ammunition, they don't go and pick up the bigger gun. Like, dude, there's an AK there. Go pick up the AK. And I love that about The Last of Us, because in true video game fashion, when the gun was empty, go pick up the gun of the guy that you just killed. And that's, I remember that from, God, what was the one about with all the carjackings and stuff that came out like 100 years ago, like Vice City
Grand Theft Auto.
Grand Theft Auto, yeah. I became a horrible driver after that. But yeah, that's kind of on the lighter side, but on the serious side, these are some serious ass heroes. Joel is such a fantastic hero. He's sort of he's the unwilling hero at first, and he becomes, he embraces his heroicism, his heroics, and Ellie is just amazing. Now I have to give a shout out to the actress. What's her name? Bella Ramsey. Is that she was I couldn't believe that I went through, both my daughter and I went through the entire series, and then at the very end I was like, oh my God, I know where she's from. Game of Thrones. She played this feisty 12-year-old queen in the north who was such a badass. I mean, I encourage, if you haven't seen it, just Google Bella Ramsey Game of Thrones video clip, and you will see in one little, 2-minute clip why she's the perfect person to play this role of Ellie. I loved
She's an amazing actress, and the first time she was on screen, I've never seen her before. She had this almost look like from like a 16th or 17th century portrait, like her face is so unique and different. And I love that they picked her for this role, that she's just completely unique. It's not your typical classical beauty.
Right.
So she was phenomenally talented in it.
Yeah, so objectivists are no strangers to a dystopian universe. Atlas Shrugged takes place in a dystopian world. And what I think objectivists will like about this, that's similar to Atlas Shrugged, here we are bringing in Atlas Shrugged, is that the battles are primarily between heroes, and villains are somewhat irrelevant. And in this case, the focus, not that the villains aren't irrelevant, in this case, they that sometimes challenge the heroes quite deeply. But it's the real conflict, the real thing that keeps you on the edge of your seat is the development of the relationship between these two extremely independent and powerful human beings. I love it. It's an inspiration, and you get to meet other people in this universe who are, in many respects, heroes in their own right. Episode 3 was one of my favorites, where Bill, you get to explore the relationship between Bill, played by Nick Offerman, and his lover, which Frank. Comes as a Frank, right? Who's also a fantastic actor who you will see in the first season of White Lotus if you should want to watch it. A very different series than this, of course. But the development of that relationship was so wonderful to see. Real love. It's gonna make me cry. It was real love, and the romantic gesture at the end. It was very much in the objectivist vein when you would hear Rand say something to the effect of, when you lose that person that your romantic love, it's nearly impossible to want to go on. You have to love life much more. And given the state of the world as it was, when Bill and Frank got together, I could totally see why he would not want to live in a world without him. Mm-hmm. Beautiful romantic concept surging through that entire episode, but I think through the series as well, mixed with enough realism that you don't it's not unidentifiable, right? These aren't ideals sitting on the clouds, but they are certainly ideals, right? They're touching grass still in the way that Rand heroes are. I think one of the things that distinguishes Rand's heroes, I think, from other heroes in novels is their accessibility, even though many would not necessarily consider Dagny accessible or Francisco d'Anconia accessible. I consider them accessible in that I could be like them, not imitate them, but I can have those qualities of character, that quality of integrity, that deep commitment to my values that they have, and be a hero in my own way and in my own context. That's what Rand inspires me to do, and I gotta say, so does Ellie and Joel. Do you guys want to say anything before we go on about any individual plots or characters? There were a couple of great characters that come into the season. One in particular, I'm thinking of Henry Burrell, played by Lamar Johnson, who played the brother, I think the older brother of the kid who eventually gets infected.
Oh, that was heartbreaking. One of the things I absolutely love about this series, when you bring up the episode with Bill and Frank. Now, of course, I want to say Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but that's different. But one of the things I love about this series is that it's not afraid to set aside Joel and Ellie for a minute to tell the incredible backstories of some of the characters that they're going to later be in touch with. I think next to episode 8, probably episode 3 was my favorite with Bill and Frank. But also that story of Henry and his brother protecting his little brother. That was a beautiful story. The story of Ellie and her friend friend and mentor, and I think kind of wannabe girlfriend in the arcade. That was a beautiful story, and I think that this show really. A lot of shows are afraid to drop their main characters to tell the stories of secondary characters because maybe they don't have confidence that they can carry a story. But and this is just a testament to the writing as well as the brilliant acting. All of these actors just elevated their game. I don't know.
And I think Druckmann might have gotten some
for me because the Bill and not Ted.
Bill and Frank.
Bill and Frank episode was the tension release. Like because he had all the booby traps around, you could like relax for a minute. He was going to be safe, and we could have the story and get to it was like audience relief. And I felt the same with the background story in the mall, which felt kind of Stranger Things. I don't know. Did you pick up on it? Felt like the same.
It did, yeah. Yeah, it did. It did a little bit.
It was almost like a little show within a show. And then you're like, oh crap, when they both got it, you're like, oh, Ellie's gonna have to kill her friend. Although they never show it, that's coming. And it does come out later. I mean, there's just this is what made the show, but it wasn't your typical zombie story, and I appreciated that.
Right. I think zombies only show up maybe 3-4 times in the entire series. So if you're expecting a full-on monster flick, don't expect monsters to sort of color the atmosphere from time to time and to add a certain threat element to it. But it's really about the human relationships here. And I got to say, I think Neil Druckmann and the producers might have gotten a little pushback on the Bill storyline. Not because it was 2 gay men. I think in the video game he was gay as well, but I don't remember this now, so I'm saying this by memory, and anybody who has a great memory of the game can tell me. It's been nearly 10 years since I played it. There apparently Bill becomes a pretty deep partner with Joel, and there is a lot to be mined in that relationship. Now, I don't know if that's going to come out in season 2. Whether they're going to mine it there or not, but people were upset. Now, I love the one-off. I think it was such a beautiful story. I don't need to know anything more about Bill. I don't need to see the relationship between he and Joel. In fact, it might even seem anticlimactic after the romantic, thing that I saw transpire in that episode that was so elegantly written and so elegantly acted by those 2 amazing actors. And what I also like is it's sort of incorporating wokeness, all right, but not in the politically self-conscious way that so many shows are doing it today, but in the actual sense of allowing these folks that we might not have ordinarily seen in television 10 years ago to have normal, beautiful, even beautiful romantic relationships, right? And so that we can relate to them in an entirely different way, which if woke was not toxic and filled with this sort of victimology underneath it that seeks leverage through the political process and through guilting and people and separating people, would actually be a really great thing. It's really great to be attuned to people who have felt on the outside, but now we're bringing into the mainstream and seeing these relationships happen and seeing ourselves empathize and feel for them. I think it's a great thing, the way they were able to do it with Ellie's character as she's exploring her sexuality, and Bill and Frank, and also to take a stereotype of a man, which Bill is potentially a stereotype of a guy. He's a survivalist. He's a
prepper.
He's
a prepper, right? Yeah.
Prepper?
A prepper. You've not heard this expression, Mark?
Yeah, he's a prepper. He's a prepper, but you'd see him, probably trumping around the Capitol on January 6th with a flag, and you think, wow, this guy. This guy is a full-on survivalist. He's that fringy white militia guy, but then you see him cooking a gourmet meal by himself, and you start to sense a flavor in the man that's delicate and interesting and off color, and it throws you, and it begins to throw you. And then when he catches Frank inadvertently in one of his booby traps, you get to see this sensible side, the sensitive side to him, the poetic side to him, the side with taste and color and appreciation.
Artistic. He's very artistic. Everything he does is littered with art.
Right. You see that start to come out, and you knew that it couldn't come out when he was living with his mother there, probably taking care of her and harboring conspiracy theories of the yin yang. But with Frank brought out that dimension in him, brought out the most beautiful part of his personality, the most beautiful part of him, which I thought was a dynamic statement about what love can do. And how cool that we could see it in that forum, because I think people are sort of getting a little, I don't know. I feel like it's becoming a trope. This wokeness in Hollywood is becoming a trope, and people are like, "Oh my God, another one of these and another one of these types of." I have to keep seeing these relationships. I feel like it's overdone. But here it was perfectly done.
Somebody needs to turn it into a drinking game, the woke drinking game, or bingo, woke bingo.
This is the way it should be done. Just diversity of relationships and people intermingled, but it's not like their conflict is not their victimhood. That's where I think is the distinction.
Yes. What their conflict isn't their victimhood, and what binds them isn't their victimhood. What binds them together is their appreciation and love for each other, their values, what they see in one another, what they bring out in one another. That's very powerful. I mean, the more I'm talking about this, the more powerful I think this series is, the more potential I think it has to do lots of interesting things in our culture. I'm not sure what, but it's certainly advancing a heroic narrative without telling you that it's advancing a heroic narrative, because it's realistic enough that you don't feel like you're being preached to. Yeah. And sometimes heroic narrative stories have that feeling to it, like somebody had the ethics first and they wanted to, and the idea of narrative came second to the ethics. And I think the narrative comes first here, and these powerful characters are just animating this narrative in a way that makes me feel like Neil Druckmann's sense of life is very interesting. I'd like to know a little bit more about it. I've met him before. I did a reading of The Last of Us when they were going to make it into a movie from Sony. This is before the television stuff. So, and Justin Theroux was originally was reading the part of Joel, and I was reading the part of David, whom I have to say was artfully played by Scott Shepherd. David is the cannibal that you meet in the game. It's in the winter quarter. It's in one of the most terrifying parts of the game is when Ellie is alone, Joel is injured, she has to go out and fend for herself, and she meets David, who comes across at first as a preacher, a sort of a spiritual leader, but then you find out that he's actually something far, far darker. And I was thinking, I could see why they would cast somebody like Scott Shepherd, because he comes off as benevolent. There's no hint, really. There's no hint in his face, in his demeanor. He doesn't project any malevolence whatsoever. And it comes out as in little dribs and drabs in rather surprising and shocking fashion. And it makes his manipulation of people that much more intense and powerful and frightening. And when it comes to full fruition at the very end, when Ellie's running for her life, one of the most terrifying parts of the video game, which I had to turn off several times because I thought I was going to have a heart attack, when he lets his monster out, it is terrifying. It is terrifying. And to know that this kid, this 13-year-old kid, is alone with this man trapped in a room she can't get out of. Horrible nightmare, extremely well acted by Scott Shepherd. I just wanted to say that he was able to bring great sense to that part.
The realism, the believability of that felt so real, of some person running, like some kind of church priest or somebody in Christian person that comes across all loving and I'm there for you and I'm bringing the community. And then that just like very diabolical power hunger that he's hiding right beneath the surface. That was really well done. I agree.
Power hunger and perversion. He actually asks her in so many words to be his concubine.
Yeah. Look at all the great kids we could have. What a great line of I mean, it just
I was supposed to call you after this episode and I didn't, so I've been waiting to hear what you thought.
That's right, because I wish that we could have gotten to episode 8 together, because I would have wanted to when I was actually out there in Colorado. But episode 8 was my absolute favorite episode. You keep expecting Joel to recover and save her, and it's beautiful and brilliant that they had her save herself. It was such an effective use of agency, and it was and it's such trauma for her as well. The whole she's traumatized. She's getting traumatized every time. She's like, when she finally is beating him over the head and kill you see how traumatic it is for her. But it was such a beautiful episode, though, where you really Joel, you see her compassion and admiration of Joel and love for Joel. You really start to see that love for Joel, because she doesn't want him to die, and that is sort of the beginning of their relationship turning from he just sees her as cargo to more of a father-daughter like relationship. You see that love in her, and he at the very end, that end scene, both Max and I just lost it. We were just in tears when she comes out and he's there for her after she's already disbanded the foe. But he's there for her, and he puts his arms around her and says, "It's okay, baby girl," which is, he hasn't said that since his daughter. It was such a beautiful moment, and that was the moment where they became father and daughter. That relationship, that bond between them, was now out of, I would say it's now out of volition. Before, it was sort of an obligation. He was responsible for carrying her to where she needed to go. And now it's like this volitional relationship, which I thought was beautiful.
Yes, he crossed the Rubicon in that moment when he said, "Baby girl." He crossed the Rubicon into parenthood, which brings us to one of the most controversial pieces of the show. One that I think objectivists will be talking about for a very long time. And well, maybe they won't be talking about it for a very long time. We'll be talking about it for a very long time. We'll do the super chat in a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so at the very end of the series, the very last episode, this is a total spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it, but if you haven't seen it, too bad. it'll still shock and amaze you.
Put your earmuffs on.
Their journey was to get her to the Fireflies, the rebel group out there that's against the government authoritarian state, to get her to their headquarters because she has immunity from this cordyceps fungus, and they were going to use her as a cure. Now, of course, they both, meaning Ellie and Joel, go into this thinking probably the way Will Smith looked at it, as the cure is in his blood, right? That's the way he looked at it in the what was the movie he did.
I know what it is. Z
having
something?
a senior, huh?
Was it? No, that was the one that Brad Pitt was in, not Z Nation or.
No. I'm having a senior moment. I should know.
Somebody, I Am Legend. Thank you, Allie.
Thank you. Oh, good. Yeah, I Am Legend. So, so he's thinking it's probably in the blood, but no, they have to actually kill her in order to dissect her brain and take the cordyceps out of her brain, and then use that somehow in some experimental process that will apparently save the world. Of course, it'll stop the spread of this infection. And Joel is having none of it. And in the final episode reveals just how ruthless he is in pursuit of his values, which I loved. Zero mercy for anything that got in his way, to save his daughter from annihilation. Okay, he saves her, but in the end, when they arrive at their camp, the place where their Shangri-La, where they're going to be safe, I think, from any more infected, she asks him about why, he took her out of there. And he lies. He lies to his daughter about why he took her out. He says there are other people. They found other people. There's lots of people who have this immunity. It's not on you. Big fat lie. Now, of course, we objectivists have issues with honesty. We have issues with lying. We have very, I think, deep thoughts with respect to integrity. Neil Druckmann himself said, sometimes parents have to lie to their kids. Sometimes it's for the best. Now, I think it caused deep dissension on the part of all of us in a phone call last night. I think it would cause some dissension on the part of every objectivist. And I want to hear any objectivist who is listening. What do you think about this lie? Was it a good lie? Like the Nazis are at your door, you're harboring Jews, you tell the Nazis the Jews aren't there? Or is it a bad lie, a complete evasion in a way that is going to come back and bite them in the ass? Which I think it has to be, because it's a story point that's going to cause conflict down the line. But I'm very interested in any objectivist thoughts about it. We're going to talk about it here. After we read a couple super chats. Jennifer, you can start us off after we read. You want to read the super chats?
Sure.
Jack?
Yeah. Let me go. I hope I haven't lost them. Let's see.
I haven't if you've lost them.
I think I've got, okay. All right. So if I've missed any before, Catherine Cassio's first one for $1.99. I look forward to TV talk. Thank you for the support, Catherine. And Rose Richards for €5.99, still on 3. Well, sorry for the spoilers, Rose. And Hooked, still on 3 and Hooked. What you think about the anarchy going on between the Fedra and Firefly? It somehow reminds me of COVID times without zombies. Interesting parallel. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't call it anarchy. I would say, there's an authoritarian state that has grown up in response to the pandemic, and people who are rebelling against that authoritarian state, very much like COVID, which wasn't anarchy. It was a sort of an authoritarian state dictating rules that people thought were egregious and didn't want to follow. A much more mellowed version of what I think is happening there. I think
it's a little different too from COVID too, in the sense that at least in The Last of Us, the science is pretty conclusive. right? The science is very conclusive. These people's brains are getting eaten by a fungus and they're killing everybody, right? That's way different from there's a virus. It may or may not affect you in a serious way. Here's a vaccine. It may or may not, be effective. But we're locking you down anyhow. I can understand the lockdowns from a federal perspective in a better way. But what they do, FEDRA takes it a step further and takes away their individual rights. They're not free anymore. And I wonder, is it possible to have a quarantine zone and still have individual rights? If somebody wanted to escape from the QZ, well, that's actually a danger to the rest of everybody else, because then they're, allowing other people potentially to come back in and kill them.
Yeah, so the definite difference here is you have something with a nearly 100% kill rate, and it not only kills them, it creates these monsters that are capable of doing great damage and spreading this thing throughout the world. Now, I don't know that you have to set up an authoritarian state to deal with a pandemic like that. I think because any state set up under those parameters will, in fact, always deprive you of your individual rights, and it will never let go of that power once they've gotten it. So we would have to come up with some creative solutions to deal with a pandemic like that without, bestowing a great deal, too much power on the political class, as we tend to do. Jennifer, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, the point of view is told through like Joel and Ellie's point of view, and so you don't really get to see, well, what was FEDRA trying to do? Were they creating a defense against these people? Like, you need some kind of defense against this. This is why you form states, right? So we didn't even get privy to that conversation going on.
And I'm also not 100% clear.
Each other, or were they all part of one? I don't know.
I'm also not 100% clear on the mission of the Fireflies. They, because they're sort of described in some terms as a terrorist group. But I guess that they are bombing certain installations. But what is their goal? What is the Firefly manifesto say? Are they trying to disband FEDRA? Do they have a better way of dealing with the cordyceps? I mean, obviously, Ellie is the only hope. Which there was I'm going to finish the super chats, and then when we talk more about the last.
By the way, if Allie is in the conversation, she's sort of a know-it-all about this game. You might. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. She knows a lot about the game. She might have some insight into the Fireflies that we don't have.
Yeah, actually, and she has been posting. She actually posted a few in the chats also about Frank and Bill. I'm not able to read them all while I'm listening to the conversation as well, but she had some interesting stuff to say. So people should kind of go through, if you're going to read this again, go through and read some of the comments that Ali said, because it's been very insightful. So Kiana Pellegrino for $2, just showing love, heart, hi all. Okay, and Kirk Barbera, love The Last of Us. Thanks for discussing, for $5. Thank you. That's awesome.
Thanks, Kirk.
And let's see what else. Okay, all right. I think we're. Oh wait, no. Maybe I missed more. Hold on. Yeah, I did. Jeez Louise. I'm a bad super chat person. Okay, so Michael Sweet for $2. Tell the truth in this instance. Michael, I am.
Yeah.
This is from our question. What should he do?
I agree with Michael. Michael also said, I was super annoyed he didn't tell the truth. However, his character came out. It grated on my nerves the moment he did that, because I didn't see Ellie as this innocent child anymore. She had lived a real hard life the past several months with him. She was an adult in this world, and she deserved to know what had happened. I understood what he did. I understood him blowing it and saving her life. That made total sense to me. But he owed her the truth at that point, and he kept her from that. And it wasn't his place. That's my position.
We have one Jennifer and one Michael, who say, tell the truth. Of course, then we have no conflict for season 2, but hey, Jax, do you want to tell us what you think until we get any more volunteers who want to put their head on the chopping block?
So this is interesting, because after we had our amazing discussion last night, I actually went.
It was very heated.
We almost all broke up with each other. But after that, I went and I did some research, and I read. I don't know if you guys read that article that I sent to you last night, but I read an article on why did Joel lie. Now, my belief before I read that article was that the purpose of his lying, the reason why he lied to Ellie, was not because he felt ashamed about what he did to rescue her, but my belief was that he lied to her because he didn't want her to have the burden of being the savior of humanity on her shoulders anymore, and that also she was such a value to him that he couldn't really, he didn't want to live without her. But he was also my main belief was that he was doing this so that she no longer, as a 13-year-old girl, yes, she has experienced more than any 13-year-old girl ever should. By all intents and purposes, she has experienced so many adult experiences, but she is still a 13-year-old child with a brain that is still developing, who does not, despite everything that she's been through, lacks the kind of years and wisdom that Joel, an adult, brings into it. And they were effectively father and daughter at this point. And so my belief was that as a father, he was protecting her and trying to give her some kind of a semblance of growing up, of normalcy in this crazy world. So I was okay with it. I was okay with I knew it was going to cause all kinds of problems, because what did
Pedro say?
What did Pedro say?
What was what did he say about Joel's choice?
What, Pedro Pascal, you mean the actor? I didn't, I don't know. What's the article? Didn't you read the article? Okay. Yeah. So now we're talking about the article. Okay. But now in the article,
I'm definitely interested in hearing how he justified this as an actor, as an aspiring artist, and as somebody who takes ethics seriously.
So I can't remember if he was actually quoted in it, but if you read it and that's what you then you did. So
I don't think the article was related to Pedro's opinion about it. I don't think they were related, were they?
Well, so his thoughts about why Joel the character makes the decision.
His thoughts about it were that that he was so ashamed of he didn't think that Ellie would ever be able to forgive him for what he did to save her life. That he didn't think that Ellie would ever be able to forgive him for murdering all of those people to rescue her. And if that is actually true, then I will condemn him for lying, because that's not a valid reason for lying. Just to save yourself from shame, to save yourself from condemnation. I think the valid reason for lying as a parent, and this is a very, very specific role for, parent, to child protector, to protectee, is, lying to save the child in a way, to save the humanity of the child, or to save some aspect of the child in the same way. And we did talk about last night in the debate to end all debates, we talked about life is beautiful, and
we also talked about that he actually wasn't her dad. And that just because they hugged didn't make it an
It was
But
so
it doesn't-
much more than a hug.
Biology
It does
doesn't
not
make
mean
you a
that she
man.
wants to be shackled
Biology
and kept
does
in
not make you
prison
a
by
man.
this
I know you-
35-year-old man. She
Well, hold on.
deserves the truth.
You keep making it about this man-woman slave phenomenon, which is not at all the conversation.
It isn't
It's
from the perspective of the
not.
parent, but from
And
the
fatherhood
perspective
is not about biologically creating a child. It's about
I'm related to
being the
as a
sheepdog. It's
woman,
about caring
as
for
a
that kid
budding woman.
bestowing values on them that enable them to become independent,
Not his
strong, capable
place.
people. I want to say my piece now. My piece was that I thought he should tell her the truth. And if she decided to go back and sacrifice herself for humanity, say no and stop her. This is exactly what Jennifer's responding to, because to her, a 13-year-old is a fully autonomous being, and what makes her a fully autonomous being,
This particular one.
which I don't think is the case, even though she's had tons of experience because she lives in an apocalyptic world where she has to fend for herself more than most 13-year-olds do. She still does not have the context, as brilliant as she is, as awesome as she is, to make that kind of decision. I'm sorry, I would make her sit on it. I would make her sit on it for a while at least.
At least tell her the truth. At least tell her the truth. See how her reaction is.
I said I would tell her the truth.
Would be, oh, let me give my life and say that. Then you deal with that. But to just tell her a lie and not even let her deal with it and then decide what she wants to do is just hiding her from reality.
Fear,
Jennifer,
not
I
only
agree
that,
with
not
you
only
on
that.
that.
Yes, as am I. Not only that, it's a weakness in Joel that is actually disturbing, given the fact that we've seen how clear and clean he is as a hero. And I know that writers like to put weaknesses in characters, and that those weaknesses can sometimes lead to great story points and or strengths that are reversed to become strengths later on down the line. But when you lie to avoid shame, particularly with respect to someone that you have a relationship based upon truth and honesty, you are completely second-handing it. You're primacy of conscious guy. You're judging yourself based on what they feel and think, as opposed to the facts of reality. And I think that you're right. The lie is a bad thing, and the justification from the character's point of view is a terrible thing. I think it's a weak thing. Weak in all the bad ways. And I like fragility in some cases with strong characters. I like seeing these kinds of dimensions in characters. It's interesting. In this case, I don't know. It's definitely a glaring thing that in the game made me go, what? And in the movie sort of leaves me with the same problem. Like I'm not so sure I'm on board. I don't know how to feel, but of course my solution, taking her prisoner until she's old enough to make that decision, might not fare very well with many objectivists.
What would John Galt do? What would John Galt do if he had formed a tremendous bond with a 13-year-old girl, such to the extent that he actually felt as a father figure, and she as well? Because the important thing here is that it's not just him. Hold on a second. It's not just him feeling like he's the father, but also she does feel like she's the daughter as well. So what would John Galt do? I think John Galt would have done everything that Joel did up until the point of lying. I think John Galt would have told her the truth. And then, but I do think that if she then said, well, you know what? I'm sorry, John Galt, I'm going to go back to the Fireflies and give over my brain to them. I think that he would say, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're going to.
That's possible. That's more understandable than lying, for sure.
Yeah.
Or offer another perspective, since Ellie is so important to Joel that he's willing to kill just about the entire, he actually is willing to kill the entire world for her. Maybe the other alternative is, okay, if this is what you're going to do. Now, I'm saying this as if she's an adult, and I don't think she's an adult, doesn't have that full context, and I stick by that. But let's just act as if she is this full-fledged adult that can do whatever she wants. I would say, great. I'll go with you. I'll protect you till you get there, and then I'm killing myself.
I like what Michael Sweet says. Galt would have already made the engine that wipes out the fungus.
Hey man, there's no story then, Michael.
Game over.
That's the thing about objectivists. It's like game over from like the first couple of minutes.
Yeah. So what I think is very interesting, Ali said something earlier, basically like Neil did his job right because we're all arguing over it, which, you know, it is very controversial. What I think is very interesting about Joel's choice to lie to her is that this now gives him room to grow. It's going to be because he made
it's brilliant from a writing perspective.
It is, right? And it's hilarious because his writers were like, oh, that's brilliant. But then, you know, when we're talking about it, we're like, oh, no, wrong.
Well, that's true. Yeah, from a writing perspective, it's an interesting cliffhanger too. It's a very subtle cliffhanger, right? Most shows leave you suspended in some action, literally hanging over a cliff, so that you have to you have to go to the next episode and watch it to see what happens to the characters who are in peril. And in this case, the characters are in peril. I mean, they're heading to their haven, but the peril is the breach of integrity, the loss of confidence that one is going to have in the other, and what that will now do to their relationship. And now I'm on pins and needles waiting to see what the hell is going to happen, because Ellie is a very pure character.
She's going to find out. She's going to be pissed. It's going to cause friction between them. She may even rebel. When had he told her the truth, he might have been able to reason with her, but now she's going to be like, okay, I'm going to go save the world. And he's going to have to.
Parenting is an impossible task. You guys are parents. It's about. I'm a step parent, so I'm even in a more impossible scenario in a way. But still, it's impossible, and you can't be sure in the moment when you do something that it's the right thing to do down the road. You can try to keep your full context in view. But sometimes that's limited, and sometimes it doesn't. They
don't come with instruction manuals.
So
they don't come in with instruction manuals.
Speaking of lying, there was, and thank you, Walter Bishak. I hope I'm saying your name right for €2. When I watched episode 9 again last night, I noticed something that I hadn't noticed before. So first of all, the woman in episode 9, it begins with the birth of Ellie, right? And the Easter egg here is that the woman who plays Ellie's mother is the actress who voiced Ellie in the game. So that was pretty cool. Cool shout out. She gives birth to Ellie. It'd be, oh my God, talk about, I thought I had a tragic birth. But I mean, talk about.
You didn't have a cordyceps infected zombie running.
No, I just had an emergency C-section. That was in a hospital with medicine and everything, and there were not zombies.
You mean your daughter's birth?
My daughter's, not my birth. No, my daughter's birth. I thought that my daughter's birth was tragic because I lived through it, and it was, she was in the NICU and everything. But Ellie's mother goes into labor running away from a cordyceps that is effectively going to eat her, and gives birth. She the cordyceps is on her and she's stabbing it, and the cordyceps has bitten her, and after the cordyceps has bitten her and it's been in her bloodstream and she kills it, Ellie comes out, right? Ellie comes out after she's been bitten.
Mm-hmm.
She tells she tells the woman who comes to save her, she was born before, right? So talk about lies. I mean, it just so and what's cool about it too is that you see why Ellie has the immunity. It's not just some random thing. But
and one of the more memorable birth scenes, I think, out there next to Cronenberg's The Fly, when Gina Davis has the dream that she's giving birth to a big old maggot. Definitely. Sorry, But definitely a memorable birth scene. And you see that Ellie is born in battle. I mean, she's born, and you see that where she gets her willpower and strength from, because her mother had to run across a big field and go up while in labor and get through to the top floor of a house to try to get away from this thing that's chasing her while in labor, and it pops through and attacks her while she's giving birth. I mean, that is just I mean, it's like Superwoman giving birth to Superwoman, Supergirl. It's a great introduction to the character.
Michael Sweet says definitely lie here. Michael Sweet says that's the time to lie. Oh, okay. It's all right to lie there.
Yeah, right. It is.
Yeah, so I think we've sort of mined everything, unless I'm missing something, guys. I think this is a big thumbs up from my point of view. A great show, very heroic. I think objectivists will love the characters, because they're extremely powerful, very heroic.
I'm dying. I wonder what Yaron would think about this show. That would be really interesting. We need to somehow tag him.
Yeah, but you have to pay him like $500 to watch.
Yeah, I'm not going to pay him $500. Yaron, I love you. I just don't have $500 for. But maybe he'll watch it. Maybe one of his like whales, one of his super chat whales will ask
Yaron to come on to TV Talk with the TV choice of their TV show.
Yeah. All right. If anybody here are crossover Yaron fans, and if anybody's like a whale, try to get Yaron on so that we can talk about his TV show choice. I know what his TV show choice would be. It would be Mr. Sunshine. But it'd be interesting to talk to him about it. But
yeah, Mr. Sunshine is very good. What?
What'd you say, Jennifer?
Maybe we can come up with a fresh one. I'm sure he has other ones.
Yeah. Well, speaking of shows, and Ian just reminded me of this. Thank you. You guys, when we talked last night about our next show, I completely forgot about some of the big demands for shows that we were getting from our fans. And the one that we've gotten consistently is The Expanse. So we talked about doing this show.
What is it on?
I think it's Amazon. It used to be on Sci-Fi Network. Now it's on Amazon. There are 6 seasons of it. I think we only do the first season, and I think the first season is like 10 episodes, maybe possibly 12. But the expand. I mean, what do you guys? We can take this conversation offline, but if you guys, I mean, it's cool science fiction. I loved it. I am excited to watch it again. There's some actually interesting, potentially kind of religious themes in it as well. So if we just have to figure out a date, we'll figure that out offline. But are you guys all good with that show then? The Expanse season 1,
sure.
Just season 1.
Why not? Yeah. Sure.
Okay. All righty. I don't think we have any more super chats. So I think
it says to watch the first 1.5 season because it equals the first book.
Oh, Ian says that. Oh, okay. Well, Ian, let us know which episode we should watch up until in the first 1.5 seasons, so that we can. So I mean, I've seen all of them, but it's been a while, so I'll look forward to watching it again.
All right.
Cool. I always like it when there's a show that I feel passionately about and have a lot to say about. I feel like a few shows ago, I haven't had much to say about some of the shows, even though they were sort of good. They never hit me in the gut like this one did. And I hope other people have that.
The Last of Us.
The Last of Us.
Oh,
yeah. So I haven't seen The Expanse yet, but so it's I always like when there's lots of material to talk about here, and there's even more, but the hour's almost up, so we have to go and do other things, folks. We can't be here with you forever, as much as we may like to. So I just want to bid everyone adieu. This is TV Talk brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK. I'm Mark Pellegrino. You are Jennifer Bouani and Jack Schumann. Okay.
Jacqueline Schumann.
We are saying goodbye, and I wish you all healthy premises. Peace.
Happy April.
Love it.